Hello, welcome to the Analyst Inside Cricket with me, Simon Hughes.
And me, Simon Mann, in Lahore.
And, well, it's a sad day, isn't it? And that means now, Simon, that England have lost to Afghanistan and got knocked out of the Champions Trophy, that three successive ICC one-day tournaments have ended in rather dismal failure for England. So it's not surprising there were some gloomy faces tonight in Lahore, if you were an Englishman. And it must mean some fairly harsh decisions need to be made. Would you agree?
Well, I think it's fairly clear, and Joss Butler intimated it afterwards that he's considering his position as captain after those three failures. I mean, look, the T20 World Cup, England got to the semi-finals, and back in the day, that would have been seen as riches, wouldn't it, for an England white ball side to get to the semi-finals? But I think they only had one really outstanding performance against West Indies in that competition, and then lost to India in the semi-finals. They were well beaten. Two 50-over failures. They were really poor in the World Cup in India, finished seventh in the group table as defending champions. They've come here and they've been involved actually in two belting games of cricket, but they've lost them both and they're out of the competition. So inevitably, you try and take stock, don't you, and think, well, how do we take this team forward? How does it improve? And Joss Butler said afterwards, we need to consider all possibilities and get English cricket back to where we should be in white ball cricket. Personally, I need to work out if I'm part of the problem or the solution. So that's something for him to think about. We're in the cold light of day, and he said, I'm not going to make any emotional decisions or emotional statements after a defeat. And it was a gut-wrenching defeat for England because they got close. And at one point, towards the end, at one point when Jofra Archer and Craig Overton were together, I thought England might well pull it off. And then Overton was caught along on, and then it all fell apart. But, they were left a bit too much to do. They lost too many wickets early on. And every time they seemed to be gathering momentum in the game, they lost a wicket. Anyway, so should we talk about the game, or should we talk about Joss Butler, or what England should do in the future?
Well, I think we talk about the big story, which is Butler himself, really. But I would say just before we get into that, I would say actually, even if they'd won today, I feel that would have camouflaged deficiencies in the team and a lack of good planning actually as well, because over the last sort of couple of years, England haven't played 50-over cricket very well. And that's partly because they don't play any domestic 50-over cricket, do they? And if you look at the way England climaxed with their 2019 World Cup triumph, it was all about good planning. It was about playing a lot of domestic 50-over cricket, a lot of international 50-over cricket. They played something like 80 games in that 4-year cycle. And, they identified a core of players that they felt could deliver. They stuck with those players, and those players did deliver over time. Now, it's jumping in and out of tournaments and a lot less matches played at international level and domestic level. And you could just see the team is sort of cobbled together. And I don't think there is much planning, really. And I think they arrived in Pakistan with an ill-judged squad, lacking things like another spinner, for instance, another proper spinner, not part-time spinner. And, they've paid the penalty for poor planning and obviously poor execution. So Butler shouldn't necessarily be to blame for all that. But, looking at his captaincy overall, he's captain in 44 games, 50-over matches. England have won 18 and lost 25. Interestingly, in that time, when England won, his average was 47. When England lost, his average was 28. And over the 44 games that he's been captain, his overall batting stats have declined. So a significant lower average, 4 runs less per innings, and a significantly lower strike rate, actually. Instead of 115 over his career, he's only striking at 103 as captain. So you can sort of feel that he's sensing he's got this burden on his shoulders. And, I think the bottom line is, and I think this was very well put by both Nasser Hussain and Michael Atherton after the game on Sky, that what they lose in Butler's effectiveness as a batter, they're not gaining with brilliant clairvoyance and smart thinking as a captain, or even a lack of sort of emotional visibility as a captain, which you want. You want a poker face. You want someone like Morgan who doesn't show his emotions. And Butler, you can just see he just looks a bit crestfallen if things aren't going so well. He tries his best not to show that, but he's not an instinctive leader of men, is he? He's a fantastic cricketer, but I think he's probably too nice a guy who wears his heart a bit on his sleeve. And that in modern day, when captaining these very emotional, passionate sort of matches that swing and ebb and flow, you have got to be kind of very level-headed and almost a bit cold-hearted. And I think he's just too nice a guy in the end, actually, to be captain of a team which just hasn't quite got all the bases covered.
Well, a couple of points. They actually made a tactical change, didn't they, to help him, which is to take the wicket-keeping gloves off him. And,
which was a good decision.
You were calling for it, actually, when you said they need to remove him by the stumps, because it's just so much of a burden to do all those things. To be a batter, captain, and wicket-keeper as well. It's onerous in both forms of white ball cricket. So they've done that. So they've done that to help him. It hasn't worked in recent times, has it? They've lost 6 matches in a row now. The other point is, will a change of captain make a radical difference? You talked about planning, and actually a lot of these players don't play 50-over cricket. England don't really focus so much on 50-over cricket. There's a lot of focus on T20 cricket, and there's a lot of focus on Test cricket, especially this year, of course, with India and Australia. The Ashes coming up. There's a lot of focus on that. I suppose you could say, well, they have brought in Brendan McCullum as a white ball coach, so in that sense they're taking it seriously, because they've got the guy that has really helped them turn things around in Test cricket to come in white ball cricket. But would a change of captain necessarily make a big difference? And if there is going to be a change of captain, which it seems likely, who is that captain? I presume it's Harry Brook. He would be the next obvious candidate in line. I'm not saying it should be him. I'm just saying that he would seem to be the next candidate to take over. I mean, he's guaranteed his place in the side, although he's having a really difficult run at the moment. He's struggled in these conditions. So what about that? I mean, would a change of captain actually make that much difference?
Well, I think
you think of like for example, you think a parallel would be in the football world. Manchester United, they got rid of Eric Ten Hag. They keep changing their coach. Got rid of Eric Ten Hag. Oh, this guy's the new man. Amarin's the new man, but it hasn't made a scrap of difference. In fact, it's kind of made them worse, actually. In actual fact, they're actually less successful under him than they were under Eric Ten Hag. So what I'm wondering is because the pieces aren't in place. I mean, I'm thinking one of the things I think is that England don't have the bowlers. They lack that craft and variation and subtlety in their bowling attack. And where are the bowlers? Where are the bowlers to transform them in white ball cricket? So that's the point I'm making. Is it all about Josh Butler, or actually is it that England don't or haven't identified or haven't got the right pieces for their jigsaw?
No, I think it's a good point, but I would say I don't think Butler is a decisive enough captain. He's a fantastic batter. Don't get me wrong. He's an incredible cricketer, probably the best white ball cricketer England have ever produced. But I don't think he's a decisive captain. I think he gets swayed a little bit, skewed by events on the field, and he can be distracted and so on slightly by the master plan is there, but maybe that doesn't necessarily get applied because events kind of take over instead of him taking control of events, just slightly. But you're right, the planning isn't there, and the problem is, I think, and it comes out in the way England have played in this 50-over tournament and the World Cup before, is that they've forgotten that it's 50 overs, and 50-over cricket is proper cricket. And our traditional listeners here will probably celebrate when I say that, because they think T20 and the 100 is Mickey Mouse cricket, hit and giggle cricket, and that 50-over cricket is at least a proper game. Well, in a way, I sort of agree with that. And the thing about T20 is basically a team game. Wickets actually don't really matter very much. You have a slog, a few balls, you might get away with it, you might not. But it's all about the team and using all the wickets at your disposal to try and make as many runs as possible. And if you get out, somebody else comes in and hits the ball instead. In 50-over cricket, you need to bat a long time. And look at the scores that have been made in this tournament so far. There have been a number of hundreds with people at the top of the innings batting all the way through and enabling a team to score 300. England at the top of the order in particular seem to me to still be playing T20. You watch Phil Salt, you watch Jamie Smith today, even sometimes Harry Brook. They look as if they're playing a T20 game. And I remember when England played against Australia in the September just gone, when Harry Brook was captain, and a couple of the early games which they lost, the players came off saying, "Well, I haven't played 50 over cricket for a while. I've forgotten how to do it," and it looked like that actually, and still they haven't grasped it, and that's reflected also in their bowling attack, which is just not got enough. It's too many part-timers. You've got to have people who can bowl 10 overs. 10 overs is proper bowling spells. Well, Afghanistan, their bowling attack today had a left-arm over swing bowler. It had a left-arm wrist spinner. It had obviously Rashid Khan, the best one-day bowler in the world. It had a couple of right-arm seamers with good changes of pace. England don't have that. England haven't got that variety. And that's where they need to look to find some new players, especially some new bowlers, hopefully in the one-day cup, 50 over one-day cup. That's where you can blood some new bowlers with some, funky deliveries and a good spinner or two. That's where we need to look. But it's going to take time to find them.
I mean, they have revamped their bowling attack this winter, haven't they? They brought in Atkinson, for example, who hasn't played. He actually had a difficult time. Cast is making progress in the side, and that now he's out injured. So, there's two. For example, Jofra Archer's come back, who was, an absolute sort of gold standard bowler for them. They've got him fit. So, they have brought players in. It's not like they've just kept the same team. Saki Mahmood has come in, and hasn't had. He's here in the squad here. Hasn't had a great deal of opportunity. So, so they have kind of revamped things, but it's not worked in two crunch games. And, that, in a way, that's the quite interesting thing about the Champions Trophy. There are no, there aren't many second chances. England had a second chance today, but that's it now. It's gone. You really have to do it on the day. Look, the bottom line is England have actually been involved in two cracking matches. The game on Saturday and the game tonight was a belting game of cricket, and they came out on the wrong side of it. It's a game they probably could have won towards the end. It felt as if for most of their innings they were losing it, and then they just gradually crept closer and they nearly pulled it off. They didn't, and that's the bottom line: is that if you don't win, then inevitably people will sort of look around. But their bowling does look, and I felt this actually for a while. Their bowling just looks vulnerable. It just looks so hittable. And look, it's not easy for bowlers in white ball cricket. Lots of bowlers, go around the park, don't they? I mean, Australia's bowlers conceded 350 the other day, but actually the pitch was flat enough.
Yeah, but that was their B team, though.
Well, I agree it was. But I mean, look, these days you've got to have options, haven't you? Because you're not going to be able to bowl your main three the whole time. You have to mix and match a little bit. So it's tough for bowlers. But anyway, so they have looked around, and actually what they've done this winter is they've gone for pace, haven't they? That's been the mantra this winter. And they went to India. And it didn't work in those conditions. Yeah, they need to find. I think they absolutely need to find a quality spinner or two, or someone with a bit of mystery. They've got Rayan Ahmed out here, and actually that's an interesting one, because that's the fact that they lost a pace bowler, Cast, and brought in a spinner kind of suggests that they didn't quite get their selection right. They didn't have enough options right from the start of the competition. I mean, they've had Atkinson and Saki Mahmood here, not played a game. So two spare pace bowlers. You'd think, well, perhaps they perhaps should have had another spinner for these conditions. Certainly for India anyway, and they didn't have that, or they didn't use them anyway. They went pace mainly with a bit of Rashid and some fill-in. And so in that middle overs today, when Afghanistan were recovering, it felt as though they were just getting through. It was like a holding pattern. They were just trying to get through, get as many overs out of the way, trying to chip away those. And I think sometimes, or often, you need to have those wicket-taking options in the middle that can change a game.
Definitely.
And England don't have that. There's the Liam Plunkett
they don't.
role.
And you think back to the people they had before in that 2015 to 2019. And we've mentioned this before. Liam Plunkett, for instance, at one point in that 4-year period, I think in about 2017, 2018, Liam Plunkett was the leading middle overs bowler in the world, wasn't he? He'd taken something like 50 wickets in the middle overs in a 2-year span. And, the thing is, he was a frontline bowler. He's a proper bowler. And he was employed to do a particular job, which was actually quite a hard job. It's going down the pit, really. I mean, it's bowling in the middle overs with men back on the boundary, an old ball and batsmen looking to try and take you on. But he actually got wickets by being controlled, by being quite philosophical, by actually charging in hard and bowling, what they call hard length, that back of a length with changes of pace and so on. But he didn't worry about the fact that it was donkey work. He just got on with it. And he was a very valuable asset to that team. They haven't really got anybody like that now. I mean, I thought Brydon Cast could have become that player, and maybe he still will. But you need energy and actually you don't need to be too emotional about that particular role, because there are days when you're just going to get battered all over the place and you've got to be quite calm and philosophical. And actually Liam Plunkett was. Cast is a bit more emotional and gets a bit sort of flustered by an aggressive batsman or something. So you can't afford that. So they do need to find someone there. And yeah, you're right. They need another, top spinner. And sometimes they were able to bowl Moeen Ali opening the bowling in 50 overs or T20, bowling his little darts, and then he'd come on in the middle and take a wicket or two. And again, he was a calm character. I feel someone like Livingston, he still gets a bit too sort of emotionally involved. And, going back to my point about 50 over cricket is a proper game of cricket, Livingston to me is just, he doesn't know how to build an innings in 50 overs. He doesn't seem to know. He just wants to, try and flail it all over after a couple of balls, couple of sighters. Well, he could be better than that, but his mindset is too T20.
Actually, and you look at the squad they picked for the India T20 series and the One Day International series. They picked a very similar squad, didn't they? It were the same players that they selected. And you think actually these days, look, they are different games. They're not quite the same game. And I think we saw that tonight in the way England approached it. You mentioned Phil Sott and Jamie Smith. I mean, they were probably two pretty ordinary shots for the situation that they were in, especially Jamie Smith. Okay, he's been put up to number 3. That's a different tactical manoeuvre by England. It's not worked so far. Hold out to mid-on in the Australia game. And tonight, the first ball that Nabi bowled inside the power play, tried to take him down the ground and miscued out to deep point. And I mean, look, if it comes off, you say, well, that's a bold shot or whatever, but it didn't. And you think that's the first ball that Nabi's bowled. And England didn't have to go, okay, they had to be positive, but the pitch is so good, the outfield's so quick that you can bide your time. And actually, if England hadn't been bowled out, I think they'd have won the game. I think that was they had their run rate was fine. So there just needs to be. Sometimes you need to play situations a bit better. Look, okay,
yes,
you can say,
you
look,
do.
Jamie Smith is quite new to international cricket, isn't he? He's his first year of international cricket. He's thrilled us. He's played some wonderful innings, and so what you hope is that players work it out, learn from it, and then next time are better. But it's not been a glorious couple of matches for him. But
I mean, it's a massive responsibility to put him in at number 3 in this sort of level when he hasn't hardly played, and he did get suckered by Nabi today with that sort of slider that he bowls, that drifter that he bowls, a beautiful bit of bowling and a slightly naive shot. And, you can bat a long time in these games. You can play. You can't.
I think that's the point, isn't it?
I mean,
the point.
Joe Root, he went probably 10, 15 overs without scoring a boundary. But you watch him bat. Obviously he's the best England have ever produced, and we're comparing apples and pears here. But the way Root, kind of builds an innings, constructs an innings in 50 over cricket is fascinating, because he just looks for the gaps, doesn't he? He doesn't think, right, I need to take this bloke down. He thinks, how can I dissect this bowling attack? I'm not a destroyer, I'm a dissector. And I'm just going to find the gaps and work my, singles and twos and the occasional boundary, and I'll manipulate the field. And he's got this sort of almost photographic memory. Where are the fielders? Where, if I just dink it, softly enough, I can pick up 2. And obviously, in the end, he did suffer from cramp. But it was an absolutely beautiful example of how to construct a 50-over innings, and it deserved to be on the winning side. Although that's to underestimate the superb batting of Ibrahim Zadran for Afghanistan, who made 170 and again played quite a classical innings, really. He hit shots all round the wicket. He hit a few over the top towards the end, but in the main, he hit the ball along the ground and again just found the gaps and played beautiful shots.
he said his post-innings interviews and post-match as well. I just looked to play sort of not proper cricket shots, and look what it brought him. Yeah, 177 magnificent innings. Afghanistan were right under pressure. I mean, they were 37 for three, and the halfway stage in their innings, they were 103 for three after 25 overs, and they just sort of disintegrated. I mean, it wasn't helped by the fact that Mark Wood had this knee problem, and actually did well to bowl the overs that he did. He bowled 8 overs, and then had to hobble off. I mean, that's probably him out of the. Well, he won't play on Saturday. I'm absolutely sure of that. And he wouldn't have played if England had progressed. And you wonder what that means for the future for Mark Wood. I mean, he does fall over and bang his knee on the ground quite a lot, and you kind of hope it's more that rather than anything serious with inside his left knee. So yeah, that was sort of grim for Butler. So what it meant was, in the end, he had to bowl Joe Root and Liam Livingstone in the last sort of 2 or 3 overs of the innings, and actually one of Root's overs went for 23. But perversely, Livingstone bowled the last over, took 2 wickets, and then he conceded a couple of runs. I mean, it's a kind of it's a mugs game, but Josh Butler was sort of scrambling around for options. Jofra Archer good at the start, and he had an over that went for 20 as well. I mean, Afghanistan showed what you can, what you can do if you're prepared to just abide your time and regroup. And England probably didn't need to go really hard at the start. Salt out for a sort of range, sort of smear pull shot bowled top of off stump. Then Jamie Smith looking to take Nabby on first ball, out caught in the ring as I mentioned. And then you're under a bit of pressure then, aren't you? You're 30 for 2. You're chasing 320 against a varied attack, who are going to present you with different sort of problems, and they weren't quite good enough. I mean, they gave it a good go. I mean, it's a fabulous game of cricket. I mean, it really was. It was compelling. I'm sure people watching on at the ground, people watching around the world were engrossed in it, because that was what you want from one day cricket, really. But I suppose top class international sport is ruthless, and you judge England by high standards, which they've set themselves over the years. Notably, I think raised expectations winning that World Cup, and and we've told it's got this great white ball generation. So you have to produce, don't you? And that's the bottom line. If you're a well-resourced country, as England are, with talent, then you have to make it count. And in this competition, as in the World Cup, 50-over World Cup, they've fallen short. So inevitably, you think, well, how can you improve? Inevitably, the focus is on those areas that the need for improvement, and where things have gone wrong.
So thinking about Josh Butler, really, I think back to the well-known, well-worn quote from Richie Benaud, the famous Australian commentator, who always used to like to say, captaincy is 90% luck and 10% talent, but don't try it without that 10%. And felt that does sum up Butler a little bit, because he has been unlucky in lots of ways, like you said today, with losing bowlers to injury and so on, and like little moments that didn't go England's way, like the Brute's dismissal, things like that, which were unlucky. I mean, actually, Duckett's dismissal was a real marginal one, wasn't it, as well? That was reviewed and correctly given out in the end, but it looked as if it might not have been. And lots of things have happened over the time in Butler's career as captain, but I just feel he hasn't really got that, unique instinct to know exactly what to do in a particular situation and lead from the front on the field. He's a sound guy, and I love him to bits as a player and as a person. I just think as captain, he hasn't got that sort of ingenuity, if you like, that perhaps you need to just raise the game and get your team over the line in those critical moments. What do you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, the results, bear that out. In a way, your job as a captain is to lead your team to victories. And if the results aren't there, then you say, well, perhaps it's time to look elsewhere. It's not the end of the world, is it, to lose the captaincy? I mean, it's funny, actually, we were talking about this earlier. In the old days, you were given sort of the captaincy for a series, weren't you? Such and such has been appointed captain for the the forthcoming series against West Indies, you weren't made England captain as such. Can you remember those days, Oz? And you were kind of
Yeah.
like reappointed. Now you're given the job, and it's on you go until you decide to resign, or someone says taps you on the shoulder. So it's not kind of at the end of the world to necessarily lose the captaincy, although you want to succeed. And it is humbling, I suppose, if you don't do what you hope to achieve. Although Butler was the captain when England won the T20 World Cup in Australia, and they produced one of the great white ball performances by an England team to take India down by 10 wickets in Adelaide. So it's possible, but I come back to saying, is the basic structure in place? The other thing as well. What about in terms of we talk about T20 and one day international cricket being different games, and yet you could lump them all together in white ball. Do you have a different captain for T20 and a different captain for one day international cricket? The reason I mention that is because now 50 over cricket after the Champions Trophy it's kind of on the back burner a little bit anyway, because the England players don't play it very much. But there's no significant white ball competition now for 2.5 years until the World Cup in October, November 2027. The focus now is going to be on T20. So do you say, well, look, actually, because this time next year England will be playing in India against, in the T20 World Cup in India and Sri Lanka, you've got to kind of focus on that, and it's a different game. So you keep Butler going and say, actually, we have a different 50 over captain. Do you separate it? Do you have three captains or not?
Well, I think you probably do, actually. I mean, Australia had two, don't they? I mean, they were using Pat Cummins as the 50 over captain, and then I think Mitchell Marsh was their T20 captain. I don't think I think it's difficult to do all three jobs. And you would see Butler. He's been white ball captain now for what, 3 and a bit years, maybe even 4 years. It takes its toll on you. Not just the leadership on the field, but all the other stuff, the other stuff that you have to do. So over time, you just get worn down by it, really. And with that in mind, I also think, by the way, I think it's a mistake to have, and I know this sounds like hindsight, I think it's a mistake to have Brendan McCullum as coach for both formats as well, because it's so, the schedule is so tough. You're always on the road somewhere. There's always something to think about cricket-wise. You need a break at times. And also, actually, I think, coaching the test team, which he's done pretty successfully, has been a sort of, what McCullum does is he brings a culture in. He's not a technical coach particularly. He's more about attitude. And that works in test cricket, because test cricket is a mental game as much as it is a technical game. But T20 and white ball cricket, 50 over cricket, is more about data analysis, matchups, all that kind of more kind of, it's more of a numerical game in a way. And I don't think that's his area, really. I don't think he's that interested in data and statistics and stuff. He's more about creating that culture. And I suppose that was shown a little bit by England in India, where, they don't enforce training. I mean, I don't have a strong view on that, but, when you're struggling a bit, you do need to rehearse these roles that you have in practice and hit more balls to get your rhythm back and so on. I remember Andy Flower actually saying when he was England coach that he found 50 over cricket much harder to coach than test cricket, because it's all those little duels and the getting the right person on for the right over and getting the right batsman in the right slot and so on. And now you have so many analysts delving deeply into all the stats to find the right sort of mix, the right slot for a particular batter or bowler. And sort of don't really feel that is McCullum's game particularly. He's more about creating that right environment to enable you to be the best version of yourself. That's what he talks about in the test cricket, in the longer format.
Yeah, I mean, I think the feeling is, and that he doesn't take as much notice of the stats analysts that England have as previous coaches. I think so. That's true. Definitely. That's his way of doing it. So there is that. And it is a demanding role, isn't it, to do both? And that actually that leads me into think about who could be next. And say it was Harry Brook, and say, well, Harry Brook becomes T20 captain, white ball captain, and plays in the Test team, and that's an awful burden. It's a big burden, that, isn't it? To do all those three things, it's incredibly demanding. Okay, he's a young, he's kind of like in a way sort of moving towards his peak years and peak energy, and he's experienced now in international cricket. But yeah, you talk about Butler being worn down. You could see something similar happening. That's why I posed the question. Actually, do you potentially have three different captains and just respect the fact that three different forms of the game? But anyway, the focus is not going to be on so much on 50
Well,
over
as
cricket.
you said, yeah, I mean, in a way, it probably doesn't matter. They don't need to announce a new 50 over captain for a while. They're now, as you say, going to focus on T20. And so
Well,
Harry
so they
Brook
have
is the
got 50
obvious.
over matches. They have got 50 over matches to play. They got the West
Yes,
Indies, in England this summer,
yes,
in
true.
sort of like
Yeah.
May, June time, 3 one-day internationals, and then they got South Africa in September. So obviously you can't just say, oh, the World Cup's 2.5 years away, we're going to forget about it. You've got to build towards it. But it does feel like it's a form of the game now that's going to be on the back burner, isn't it? Really, simply because it's Ashes year, and the next big tournament is a T20 tournament in India next year. But I mean, that World Cup will be nipping around the corner pretty quickly, because they do, don't they? The time goes quickly, and suddenly you find the World Cups. Yeah, and that's one of the things I felt about a little bit about this winter, that perhaps England have got a much better side for, say, South African conditions than they do for playing in Pakistan or in India. Well, definitely in India, they've got this emphasis on pace, which probably is a bit more useful for you in South Africa. But there just seems to be, and then the bowling just seems to need to be a bit more, I don't know, subtlety, variation.
Smart. Needs to be a bit more
Smart, yeah.
smart, clever, thinking ahead, just reading the batsman. I mean, where someone like Mohamed Nabi is so clever, you can see him sort of assessing the batsman, and he can sort of almost premeditate what he's going to do. And you only get that from experience. And of course, he's 40, so he's had loads of experience. That's a little bit what you need. In T20, you can come in and play your natural game and flay the bowling all over the place and bowl a few variations and have a brilliant time. Someone like Sam Curran has done that really effectively. 50 over cricket requires a bit more consideration and a bit more skill and so on. And by the way, we haven't praised Afghanistan probably enough here. They thumped England in the World Cup, 50 over World Cup in India, didn't they? And they've beaten them again. And I sort of feel, they've got lovely passion, but you felt that in the past, that's all they had. And they had, some flawed players who might thrive on their day, but they weren't very consistent. But actually, now they're starting to emerge. Like Azmat, for instance, he's a lovely all-round cricketer. I remember Ricky Ponting watching him during the 50 over World Cup in India and saying, I want him for, Delhi Capitals or whatever. He's a really talented all-round cricketer. What a game today. 40 off 30 balls and then 5 wickets and bowling under pressure like he did and holding it together. So he's got passion and talent. And, Ibrahim Zadran, who isn't their sort of top-rated batter, that's Gurbaz, isn't it? But he failed today. But Ibrahim Zadran took over the reins and supervise the innings. So, obviously Rashid Khan and the others, Noor, the left arm wrist spinner and so on. They've got more and more players now who they can trust to turn a match at this level.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're not going to see a better one-day innings than the one Ibrahim Zadran played today. Well, not many better one-day innings than that. It was a beautiful, controlled innings and full of runs as well. I mean, 177 in the one-day international. And as for Azmatullah Omarzai, Jonathan Trott, the Afghanistan coach, afterwards saying, I absolutely love him as a cricketer. He's going to be playing for the Gujarat Titans in the IPL this time round. And he had an excellent game today. I mean, normally you come out and bat the way he did, that quick 41, and then take 5 wickets and your team win. You're absolute shoe-in for player of the match. But when someone else gets 177, then perhaps not so much. But yeah, there's a lot to admire about this Afghanistan team. I suppose the next question for them is, can they turn it on against Australia on Friday? Because they need to win that to make progress to the semi-finals. And if they do win that, they might well knock Australia out, because South Africa then the next day know that if they beat England, and they must, I mean, the way England are at the moment, they've got sort of injuries, low in confidence. They must have a good chance of beating England and Karachi on Saturday. But yeah, it's a big task to take down Australia as well. They nearly did it in that World Cup match. If it hadn't been for Glenn Maxwell, they would have done it, and a drop catch as well at that short fine lay. I can still see it now. Actually, Zadran made 100 in that game as well, a superb 100 in that match against Australia. So today wasn't it wasn't a one-off. He's done it before. I mean, his highest previous score was 162 against Sri Lanka in Pallekele. There's some quality batting today, and too good for England. They couldn't find a way to dislodge him, and that Afghanistan middle order. They just look short of wicket-taking options, and that's something they need to correct in the future if they're to make any progress in one-day international cricket. If they're not, to just go back to where they used to be, Oz, where they would come to these tournaments and they would get soundly beaten, and everyone would wail and say, gnash their teeth and say, we need to be better at one-day cricket, and next World Cup would come around and England would get beaten soundly, and everyone would wail and gnash their teeth. Go think about 2015, go back to that World Cup where England were abysmal, and they said, right, thus far and no further, and we have to change the way we play. And it was an aggressive way, wasn't it? The way they played, and you could say, well, there's that's still part of the philosophy, and Brendan McCullum's in charge of that, and so therefore you can expect the shots that Salt and Jamie Smith played today, because England want to take advantage of the power play. But I don't know, I just felt it could have been a bit smarter for England today, albeit, look, I've hugely enjoyed the game. It was a brilliant game of cricket, really, really riveting, gripping game, but you got to win. That's what it's all about. International sport, isn't it? It's about winning, largely, anyway.
No, it is. And I suppose just to finish, I mean, what's quite sad in a way for this tournament is that Pakistan haven't managed to win, and they're out, aren't they? And it's such a sad thing that not only was their tournament sort of hijacked by India, who refused, or their government refused to allow them to play in Pakistan, so they're only half hosting, and India have got this advantage of playing in every match in Dubai. But also Pakistan are playing 50-over cricket from the dark ages, and so they got knocked out as well. So, the sort of excitement of hosting their first tournament for, 30 years nearly has been rather dashed by their performances and by the antics of the Indian government as well. So, I mean, how do you think that will affect the tournament going forwards? Because Pakistan have got one more game, but they're out effectively.
Yeah, well, and that one more game they've got is against Bangladesh. And the weather in Rawalpindi is shocking, and there's every chance that game will be washed out. I mean, that really would just rub it in, wouldn't it? Damn squib in Karachi, go and play in Dubai, get sorted out by India, no trouble at all, and then your last game washed out. I mean, I hope for their sake that's not going to happen, but the forecast is not good for the Rawalpindi areas, or weather depression, and we had a bit of the tail end of it yesterday. The other game in Rawalpindi was washed out. And that would just about sort of put the tin hat on it, wouldn't it? If that game was knocked out.
So I mean, from your point of view, has it rather put a dampener on it? That not only are the hosts out of it now, but also England. So you're kind of probably a bit neutral about what happens from now on, really.
Well, look, it's a short and sharp competition, isn't it? India are a very good side. They're a very watchable team. Where's the final going to be? Of course, if India win their semi-final, they'll play it in Dubai. If they lose, the final will be in Lahore. One thing I would say, in Lahore, we had two neutral matches, and the crowd have been excellent. I mean, the England-Australia game, it was 26,000. Today was another good crowd, middle of the week. Okay, lots of Afghan support, and they loved it as well. I mean, the Afghan supporters who turned up today, I mean, they were dancing around that sort of track around the ground at the end, waving their flags. Brilliant moment when that catch was taken on the long off boundary by Ibrahim Zadran. No, I suppose what we want some really good games like today. There haven't been many like today until now. Even the England-Australia game, we kind of knew who was going to win. There wasn't that sort of gripping, sort of tense, sweaty finish like there was today, when the game was in the balance right until the end. So that's what the tournament needs, and there haven't been games like that so far. So yeah. Anyway, there are not that many matches left And that's in a way that's kind of the beauty of the Champions Trophy. It's quite a ruthless competition, and England felt that ruthlessness today, and Pakistan have felt it as well. It's been sort of unforgiving, really. And they're in a worse position than England in their their white ball cricket, aren't they? They look, as you say, playing cricket from a long time ago. Not
It's weird.
1992 though.
It's well, no, I mean it's no, certainly not 1992. I mean it's sort of
No.
strange, isn't it, how things have changed with India and Pakistan? Because if you think back to that night of the tournament in 1996, the World Cup, Pakistan were the holders, and they hosted the tournament with India and Sri Lanka, I think, didn't they? And it was Pakistan cricket was on the up. I remember actually spending some time with Imran, who had just married Jemima Khan at the time. And I went to his house and he talked about his hopes of being Prime Minister and all that. 1996. And Indian cricket was pretty much on a low ebb at the time, 1996. And now look at it, 30 years on, India is flying and the wealthiest cricketing nation in the world by miles, supporting pretty much financially the whole of the rest of the world game. And Pakistan has sort of gone backwards, and Imran is incarcerated. Did you manage to get to the border, by the way? I heard some of your colleagues made it.
Yeah, no, I was there. Yeah, that's a bizarre ceremony, kind of a flag lowering ceremony at the end of the day, right on the India-Pakistan border. It's a bit of showbiz, really. It's a sort of tourist attraction. Basically, what happens is they built a stadium on the other side, and they're building a stadium on the Pakistan side as well now. They're like, what India have, we need to have as well. And they basically sort of march up and down and sort of shout and bellow at each other. And it's all actually quite good humoured and all very theatrical. I didn't really know what to make of it. It was interesting to start with, and then I started to look at my watch and thinking how much more of this have we got left, really. But the other feature of it is there's a huge flagpole. I mean, it's, hundreds of feet into the sky, and the biggest Indian flag I've ever seen. You can see it in the distance. I imagine once Pakistan have finished their little stadium, or on their side, they'll stick a flagpole up with a massive Pakistan flag as well. But you're right, in cricket terms, I mean, you look at that Indian sort of their resources. I mean, you do feel that India could put a second team out that would be better than Pakistan. That's the level that India are at the moment. And is that going to change in the future? Probably just going to continue as they unearth more and more talent from all around the country.
So you're gloating now, aren't you? Because your predictions for the semi-finals are looking like they're coming true, and mine aren't. So I said England would just scrape through, but now it looks as if it's one of, it could be any of the three, couldn't it? Now in the Group B, tell us what the story is there.
Well, obviously New Zealand and India are through to the semi-finals, which is we both predicted that, didn't we? We both called that group. Yeah, we were both accurate, and I said Australia and South Africa in England's group would qualify. You went for England and South Africa. Look, if Afghanistan beat Australia, then that it throws everything up in the air. So Australia's still got some work to qualify. So that game's on Friday. Australia play first. If they win, they are in the semi-finals, and Afghanistan will not be, and South Africa will go through. Then the next day will decide who plays where and against whom in the semi-finals. So that's the situation. Of course, we don't know who's going to top the other group yet, although India definitely is short of a semi-final in Dubai. So whoever finishes, it's quite complicated, but whoever plays India will have to go to Dubai, even if they win the group. They won't stay in Pakistan. So
India are calling the shots, of course, but it was ever thus over the last few years.
Well, the only thing I would say about that, of course, is that it left a bit of a sour taste. But of course, Pakistan have won they won't have to go to India for the T20 World Cup. That's part of the deal of them not playing. Of India not playing in Pakistan in the Champions Trophy, T20 World Cup next year, India will not be going. Pakistan will not be going to India to play. So that's part of the deal. Although,
listen, you're getting tired. It's very late at night. We'll let you go to bed.
I must have spoken about 15,000, 20,000 words today. It's 7 minutes past 1 in the morning. It's been a long day. Look, I guess to emphasise, a brilliant game of cricket. I actually thoroughly enjoyed it. Fantastic. But and well done to Afghanistan. But that when one team wins, another team loses, and England got a lot of thinking to do about their white ball cricket in the future.
Yeah, well, we'll be applying the last rites to England's attempts in the Champions Trophy on Saturday because, of course, they're playing their last match against South Africa. So we'll be back after that to look back at that and their tournament overall and look ahead to the knockout stages. And just a little mention, by the way, of the Substack blog that I'm running with Derek Pringle on Substack. If you go to the Crickverse, you'll get lots of more you'll get lots more insight and articles and so on and videos about the world of cricket and England as well. If you go to the Crickverse, if you just type in the Crickverse on Google, it'll come up actually. And there's lots of quite interesting content on there and it's free as well. So look out for that, the Crickverse, and we'll be back on Saturday. Simon, have a good sleep.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm off to Karachi tomorrow. Speak to you on Saturday. Goodbye for now.